Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Saturday morning of What's Up in the Neighborhood, where in addition to focusing on the blogs that are listed on my personal blog roll from the good bloggers and photographers, we are now starting a series where we actually get to interview those bloggers and photographers, just like the person that we have right here. Fran Rossi Szpylczyn is a fantastic writer. She is very, very spiritual and tied into her faith, as you can see in her blog called There Will Be Bread. She's experienced something called the Camino, which she is more than happy to tell you about. And much of her writing is based upon her religious experiences, as well as what she finds in the Word of God and how it can be interpreted into everyday life. Her blog is called There Will Be Bread. Fran Rossi Szpylczyn, which I finally was able to pronounce it correctly. It is so good to have you here this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
Excuse me. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, Chuck. Thank you. I haven't seen you, well, semi in person in a long time. So I'm counting this as in person for contemporary times. So I'm doing great and happy to be here. And thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Now, Fran, when you started, what was your initial entry into blogging?
Well, way back in like 2006-ish, I started kind of reading some blogs. It was kind of still a newer thing then. And in 2007, I took the plunge. I didn't even live in Albany yet at that time. I was still living downstate. And my first blog, which is no longer extant, was called Fran I Am. And mostly it was a lot of, to be honest, really snarky kind of political comments. And I immediately fell in with an online group of bloggers, many of whom I'm still connected to in friendship and through social media. And we kind of all promoted one another's blogs and so forth. And that carried on for a while. And I would talk about or write about my faith experience, but less so. I was more private about it. In fact, when that blog started, that was still during a period of kind of like internet anonymity. You didn't necessarily want to reveal yourself. So it got to a point that was like May 2007. I'm going to say that's when it started. By summer of 2009, at that point I'm up here and I'm working at the church where I work, and I kind of just felt like that blog had outlived its purpose. So I ditched it. And then I thought about, what do I want to do? I still wanted to keep active writing, but I did want to focus a little bit more on my faith. And so thus came to me on a walk. I was out with my dog. There Will Be Bread. That was born in August of 2009. And here we are in 2021. And it's still there. So that's kind of the experience of that. So I call it the intersection of faith and life. I am a person, a religious person per se. I belong to a church. I work for the church, the Catholic Church. But I look at faith experience as it can be part of one's life in and around a church or a house of worship of any denomination. But I think the element of faith is such a larger thing. And that's kind of where I come at it from, because it's not like this is what I do, so that's what you should do. It's more like this is my experience of, seeing awe and majesty and marvel in the world. I do write about things like when I get angry. There is sometimes some political content, although more and more I'm avoiding that. I'm kind of in an off politics mode right now. And I don't write as frequently as I once did. But I still like the blog as a vehicle for communicating with people, and I'm always moved by people who respond to the posts. Most of them affirmatively.
I could theoretically make the argument, theoretically, he says, that realistically, the first true bloggers that our world ever experienced were the scribes who wrote the original texts of the Bible.
Yeah, that's true. Because that was all kind of pieced together, you know. Well, different denominations have different visions of this, but the scripture, of course, I would believe was inspired by God, but transcribed first orally and then on a parchment or a tablet over time. So yes, yes, yes.
One of your great life journeys that you've shared in your blog over the years was your trek, your Camino, shall we say.
Yep.
For those people who are not familiar with a Camino, can you give them a nutshell of what that
Sure.
means and how that inspired you creatively and spiritually?
Okay. I walked the Camino Santiago, which is an ancient pilgrimage route. People have been plying that route for well over 1,000 years, you know, since the Middle Ages. Uh, and of course, in the Middle Ages, that was kind of a different scene. You would walk there from wherever you started in Europe, and then you'd have to walk home. Modern day pilgrims, well, sometimes people walk in both directions, typically start in one place. And the goal in this particular pilgrimage is to get to the city of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And it's believed that the remains of St. James ended up there, which is part of a much longer, complicated story I won't go into. The Camino, like I said, was walked for a long time. It kind of fell into some disuse over various periods of time, especially during the Franco era in Spain. Because even getting into and going to Spain was kind of, you know, but it was always there. And it was always, you know, thought of as a, you know, amongst the least Spaniards, a pilgrimage route, religious. Now popularized primarily by the movie The Way with Martin Sheen that came out in 2010. It kind of inspired a big Camino boom. And that brought a lot of new life to it. And I walked it in 2016. It took 35 days to walk 500 miles. And with a pack on my back. It was an extraordinary experience to meet people from all over the world. You see things. It's so interesting. You know, we drive. Well, I haven't flown in a long time, but we drive, we fly, we take trains. And to travel long distances on foot is just extraordinary. And it was important as a journey of faith to sort of be, you know, one day you could be in a city, another day you're in the middle of nowhere, to see all of humanity and nature. And you're walking in good weather and bad, warmer days and colder days, rainy days and sunny days. It was a very powerful experience, not just certainly religiously for me, but also in every sense of the word. So,
One of the things, and you mentioned it just a moment ago about how the Camino had been popularized by the motion picture The Way. There's been a trend of late. I think it's like internet tourism, where somebody finds this fantastic idea and then 500 of their friends come and do it. It's the same 500 people that think, hey, I'm going to go climb Mount Marcy today
yes,
in my flip
yes.
flops with a bottle of Poland Spring. I'm going to be great doing that, aren't I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Yeah, and that there's a lot of truth to that because I think social media after the movie sort of now we get into a period of time where social media really takes off. So you have your sort of Facebook, Instagram, people, you know, myself included taking pictures, and that does attract a lot of other people, some of who are, you know, hey, they're getting there for whatever reason, but it's probably not for everyone.
For Instagram photos or something, probably.
Yeah. So anyhow, yeah, and I think that there's like a good and a bad to that. You know, I think the good news is, more people are aware of the Camino. It attracted more funds to the Camino, which developed the infrastructure of it, places to stay. It revitalized a part of Spain whose economy was in total disrepair post 2008. But on the other hand, it got really crowded, a lot of litter, a lot of garbage. That was always that was problematic. And I think now this period of pandemic has kind of sort of dialed everything back, and the Camino will come back again, but I hope it comes back in a maybe a more moderate form, because it did get overrun a bit.
On occasion, you have, it hasn't been in a while, but you do have a tendency sometimes to go from the religious world to the college radio world. I think I've heard you a few times mention that
Yeah.
sometimes some of your favorite 1980s college radio bands. Come on, you got that XTC thing going, maybe
Yeah.
Echo and the Bunnymen,
Yes. The Smiths
Smiths.
and Blotto.
You must never forget Blotto.
We must never forget Blotto.
How important is it to have a well-rounded blog and be able to put something out as often or as
In
necessary?
my case, infrequent.
I said necessary because you're not going to write something unless you know it's something that you feel comfortable with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I like having a well-rounded blog because I think one of the things in life that's always bothered me, and this goes back to a time when I had nothing to do really with church or faith, I'd fallen away from it for part of my life and then came back to it, is I think there are so many stereotypes in the world, So people are like, oh, you go to church or you're Catholic, so this must mean XYZ. It's not even necessarily they're looking at it as a negative, but they put you in a box. Oh, you do this, then you're this, that, and that. And I kind of like to mix it up a little bit because I've had this incredibly varied life. I mean, wonderful, great life. I'm still having it. And the whole idea that I can totally love the Smiths and reminisce about being in hot, crowded, smoky, beer smelling clubs in the 80s in some unsavory night spots. But God's there too. For me, God was there all along too, even if I didn't notice. So I don't think that so for me, it's about this all encompassing world full of wonder and however we find that wonder and the things that bring us joy.
Okay. Where do you see There Will Be Bread going in the future?
That's a good question. It is something I think about a lot. I would like to get back to a little bit more regular posting. I think one goal I would like to have for it is that I would like to do more. I'm no Chuck Miller, but I do like to do my little amateur photography, and I'd like to do more with that. I sometimes will have pictures and I'll think oh, I want to post that. Not necessarily even write much about it, but just another channel for sharing something creative that I do. And so that's certainly one thing. And I always have this interest, speaking while we're doing an interview, is I always have this interest in having short interviews with people, not even necessarily on video, but sort of a 5 questions for kind of thing, because I do have some connections to some authors, Catholic authors and speakers and stuff that I think would be interesting to people of faith and otherwise. Someone like Father James Martin, who's either loved or loathed, depending on how one sees him, because he is someone who makes God accessible to everyone. He's writes passionately about how the church needs to be more open to LGBTQ people and things like that. And I think it would be interesting for people to be exposed to him if they don't know who he is and think, wow, no, there's a stereotype buster for you, So things like that. That's kind of where I would like to see it go.
And just so we can promote your blog here, you can find There Will Be Bread either on the side of my blog down over here on the right, or you can go to There Will Be actually
It's actually Bread Here.
here.wordpress.com.
Yes, yes. And that's actually another one of my goals, is to kind of figure out how to actually make myself a website and get away from that more clunky, I haven't changed the template of my blog because I can't figure out WordPress, but one day.
Or just Google the words "There Will Be Bread" and her blog will pop up instantly.
Yeah. Anyhow.
Fran, I really appreciate you being part of this. Thank you so much for joining me on.
Thank you.
And we all know, of course, you're still writing about religion when you're writing about the Smiths, because you know as well that Morrissey is God.
That's right. Okay, listen, it's always great to talk to you, Chuck. You're brilliant, and I'm glad you're doing this. You've introduced me to so many great blogs, bloggers, photographers. So I appreciate that coming from you.
Thank you again, Fran, for joining me.
Okay.
And by all means, There Will Be Bread. Definitely take a look at
Come
it.
on down, people. Okay, take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.